Hey everyone, a quick note before we dive into this episode. This is the last interview we will be airing from my time in Puerto Rico earlier this year. We will have the documentary about my trip to Puerto Rico and really what's happening in the NFT and crypto art scene there coming out very soon. And in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Rob Nelson. Rob has had a long career in media. He's a graduate of Stanford Law School, done a number of different things, and now is a co-founder at Roundtable, which is a Puerto Rican-based media company that's really trying to be a bridge in this time when news feels very polarizing and very fragmented. They really want to bring all voices together in conversation, hence Roundtable. They also have a significant crypto NFT metaverse vertical. It's something they're very focused on. So Rob and I talk about the crypto NFT scene in Puerto Rico, as well as really the crypto and NFT scene generally. And I think there'll be a lot of value to be had from this conversation, even though it was recorded back in February. So not every reference might not be perfectly up to date, but a lot of evergreen nuggets came out of this conversation. And as always, I have to give a huge thanks to MetaMask for sponsoring this content, sponsoring the trip to Puerto Rico and the content that's coming out of there. Really, really appreciate them for that. And we are going to learn a little bit more about MetaMask right now and then hop into my conversation with Rob Nelson. MetaMask is the leading Web3 wallet to get you access to everything you need in Web3. If you're just getting started on your NFT journey, you need MetaMask. And if you need to fund your MetaMask account in order to buy that NFT that you've been eyeing, well, now you can do that directly through MetaMask. Just click the blue buy button on the home screen. Personally, I'm mad that I've spent extra gas fees transferring money from Coinbase to MetaMask in order to buy NFTs. I've been using MetaMask directly, and it is so much better. You can also buy stable coins and native tokens from Ethereum, Polygon, Avalanche, CeeLo, and others, and you can do it directly with your debit card, your credit card, through Apple Pay or Google Pay. And there is now an improved buying experience on MetaMask Mobile. You'll only see tokens that are in your region, so it's personalized to you, and you'll get real-time quotes, so you know you're always getting the best deal. If you haven't downloaded MetaMask yet, what are you waiting for? Go try it out. You can learn more about buying cryptocurrencies with MetaMask at metamask.io/buy-crypto. Rob Nelson.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here in beautiful Old San Juan with me.
Yes, it's gorgeous.
Let's start with just sort of your quick background and really what you're doing here in Puerto Rico.
So my quick background is I come out of a traditional television background. I had a show on Fox News, so I'm an independent, just want to be clear. Had a show on regular Fox. I've done shows with most of the big networks, radio, and digital became more and more compelling to me as a way to start having. The problem with traditional media is it's very in a box.
Yeah.
Corporate media, CNN, Fox News, very boxed, right? And it doesn't matter, everyone's got their narratives and the way it's structured, it's hyper-centralized. You know, we say what goes out, we say what's done. And all of that just seemed like it wasn't creating real engagement that we've created by definition with how social media works and all that. We have the tech and the space to do it. We're not utilizing it for more media, for news, content-oriented media. And so that's what excited me about kind of moving more into this space, this technology to do it, and combining two cool worlds. Roundtable Media, which I'm the executive producer and anchor host of Roundtable, is a decentralized media platform.
Cool.
Not in the sense of decentralized blockchain decentralized, meaning in the sense of media decentralized.
So explain what that means.
Well, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, doesn't matter. Everything runs through a central hub. That central hub decides who gets to say what, when they get to say it, which is totally the opposite, right, of, say, a social platform where everybody can say whatever they want, right? Roundtable is what we call a curated publishing platform. We invite channels into the universe, and they become a channel partner with us. So, to be invited in, so you can be told crazy. But once you're in, it's your content. You're free to do and say what you want in the universe. And I'll bring people together to have great roundtable conversations, but you're your own entity. I'm not saying what you can and can't say. We're not letting that on. We're not publishing that. We're not going with that story today. We're going with that story. It's a much different model, and it's much closer and organic. And it allows you to bring a lot of different voices into a conversation and let them also just keep having their own voices. If you're on CNN or Fox News, you can have your voice on the thing, but then on the side, nobody sees what you're doing because the network didn't want to put it on. So that's what I mean by that. And we've created two verticals, one in news and causes, again, to bring all sides, all viewpoints, uncensored, unbiased, open for conversation. And also in the crypto blockchain space, which is more unique in that that's a new space in media that I think desperately wants and needs to have a universe of conversations that are really percolating in a vast, expanding space.
And when did you first come to Puerto Rico and decide to set up this whole amazing ecosystem here?
Right, so I didn't, wasn't personally me just coming to do this. Obviously, we have an amazing, team of founding partners. James Heckman, Brock Pierce, David Bailey, all hyper successful in the media technology crypto space. And so Roundtable was official last June, and the plan was to come to base it in Puerto Rico.
Were you already here?
No.
Was Brock already here?
Yes.
Okay.
I came, as sort of a co-founding member of the early team to get this going, and I've been here for like 4 months, basically.
Okay. So you're one of the transplants.
Yes.
So go ahead.
No, I was going to say, part of, I'm guessing people always say, why Puerto Rico?
Sure, yeah. I mean, and did Act 60 play a part?
So for me, the reason why Puerto Rico was, again, I think what people don't understand about Puerto Rico and the blockchain crypto space is it is an incubator of so much in the blockchain space. It is truly I was in law school in the mid to late 90s in Silicon Valley at Stanford, where all this was happening with the internet and the last renditions of the web. And it's very much like that here. It's very much like you have all these people who have so much knowledge and insight and information about the world. And whether some of them originally came because of Act 60 or not, it started this percolation of people, the OGs to the new, to all wanting to figure this space out. And when you get that cluster, just like in Silicon Valley, it starts creating this amazing synergy. And there's a few places around the country where I think that's really happening. And Puerto Rico's one of them. Miami's another, New York, where you're seeing this concentration in the US, right? Because Dubai as well, of that kind of thing. And it does something. It just creates something that then starts creating more. And so from the outside, people are like, well, why Puerto Rico? And you're like, well, you could have said that about Silicon Valley. Why Silicon Valley? It wasn't like someone picked Silicon Valley and put a thing in it. It was like, it started happening. There were all kinds of reasons why that space allowed it to percolate. Once it starts percolating, it takes a life of its own.
And it seems like it's both transplants coming in, and some of that is Act 60, to your point, some of it may be other things. And then you also have a population here who was born here and grew up here, who are also taking to this tremendously and super involved. So you actually do have those two forces working together in concert. Can you put a finger on why Puerto Rico was such a good spark for, is there something about the culture here that kind of makes it combust like that in a really positive way?
I mean, I think there might be a number of reasons. I'm not going to pretend like I, know the reasons that everybody thinks of doing something. I honestly think a big part of it is that it sort of started happening. The thing that's a little different about blockchain crypto, say maybe than the internet, than web world and tech, as we're all that now became our things we all use on every day in the 90s. Late 90s, early 2000s, and say the Silicon Valley thing is that the access, you need capital, you need creators, you need technologists, you need that all together. Silicon Valley, that started happening. It started happening here, and to some extent, I think it's almost like it creates itself, right? Does that make sense?
Well,
there is something about Puerto Rico that I think there is something here that feels like this spark of innovation, freedom, go for it. Puerto Rico's sort of unique in how it sits with the rest of the US, having been kind of mistreated by the main thing and still people. People ask me, oh, are there drugstores? You know, Emily, what do you think drugstores? I guess there's a 24-hour CVS across from a 24-hour Walgreens. Like, you know, but I do think there's a sort of an independent, like, fieriness that percolates for creativity. But that said, you've also got a lot of the kinds of people who started to come here and now more want to come here because you see it, so you want to be where it is.
Happening.
And the capital. But one caveat I will say is in blockchain, you're allowed, it's odd in that it's actually, you can have a lot of the decentralized nature of it coming from a lot of places, but it doesn't mean you don't still get hubs. You know, we did the Puerto Rico, we had the Puerto Rico blockchain week, you know, and I was amazed at all the incredible people that were here and that came here, and the conversation kept being about, you know, like Puerto Rico is such an incredibly interesting place for this, one of the spots for this to emerge. And
it's like geyser of activity.
A geyser
well,
of
what's
activity.
interesting is it makes a certain amount of sense, because as I've been here and learned more about it, I know you have some really strong technical institutes, and so there's like, you know, people coming out with engineering degrees that are super technically strong. And then you have obviously such an incredible art culture, and there's the murals and you have the artists. So when you're talking about an industry, and NFTs in particular, maybe more than like DeFi call it, right? Like, you need the technical, you need the kind of creative art side, and then you add in some tax incentives, and it's like the perfect kind of pot to blend it all up.
Yes, with a little bit of a revolutionary mindset that I think underlies in Puerto Rico. So there's a little of that, like it's a kind of place where you're like, and it's obviously a beautiful place, and it's creative and inspiring. You feel it when you're here, but it has a little bit of that. Let's go do this. Let's go shake the world up.
Protest happening a block away.
Yeah, you know, and even the way Puerto Ricans protest. You know, this is a protest for teachers.
Yeah.
And even the way, like, you notice, I compare it between, say, U.S. protests, which, you know, people marching and holding their signs and it's a little angry, and all protests have that passion. But in Puerto Rico, the protests almost have like, there's a sort of a musicalness to it. They got drum beating, you know, and the chanting and the whole thing, right? Even that.
It's like more artistic.
It has a little bit of a like, wow, this is going, you know? So I think that energy is a big part of it. And I think, well, let's talk NFT space, because I think that's an example where you're really right. That creativity and that artistic community and that culture. And I do want to mention why I also think there's a real connection, a real unique thing when it comes to what the blockchain space can do in a place like Puerto Rico.
So I want to ask about that. I do want to ask, have there been protests, as we're on this topic of protests, around Act 60 and around
they're
crypto?
They're happy, and you know, they are. And my big answer on that is, you know, there's a legitimate discussion to have about how anything works, right? And you know, there are always, you know, I don't call it bad actors, but sure, there are people who just want to come make money and get rich and not pay taxes and leave. But what you find when you look at the core of IC, the people, the OGs, if you will, there's a real sense of like creating value. Yeah. Creating value and wealth creation that benefits everybody. You know, the number of really innovative leaders in this space that I have heard say genuinely, like in a private conversation, you know, what we can do in this space as we create wealth is how much we can create change, social change, political change, economic change. That's not just like a buzzword for these people. It's how do we do that? It's built into the nature of the crypto universe.
So what's your take?
Revolution.
What do you see Web3 being able to do in Puerto Rico? What is like what is the hope
So I think one of the unique things about blockchain is typically, if you look, whenever a new industry of any kind emerges, it's good for the economy on the face of it, right? Silicon Valley did great stuff for the economy, right? Yeah, you bring a sports team into a city and they argue we should get all these benefits for our stadium and you should all pay for it because we're going to bring so many jobs and crazy, right? The whole Amazon thing, you know, when Amazon was going to be in New York,
Brooklyn,
right?
Or whatever.
Yeah, you know, it's like, how many jobs, how much, right? That's all great. It's important. You build an industry, it creates jobs. And that's important to a community, right? Roundtable, we're really committed to being part of the Puerto Rican community, hiring Puerto Ricans. You know, I know amazing programs going on to train people in the new tech and the coding for the blockchain. There's some amazing things. And some of those are Silicon Valley people who came and are like, This guy has an amazing program to train coders, and they pay for it. You pay them back after you get your education, and you have your job if you make the money, right? And it's like you learn a skill that's really needed. And you create wealth in a community. But there's a difference between that, which is traditional, and what I think the blockchain space offers. And this is the thing I think a lot of people don't necessarily see, which is the one difference is creating a job in Silicon Valley. You're creating a job with Amazon. Someone gets a paycheck. The economy does well. With blockchain, you have the ability to create wealth that generates wealth for the people you're creating it for. So it's not just I gave you a job. It's we gave you a means to actually be a wealth generator, to generate wealth, and that's where you look at a community, and not just Puerto Rico. When you look at a lot of countries, say in Latin America, a lot of countries where there's a lot of unbanked people, you can actually, blockchain technologies will and allow for you to actually let the people of that community become stakeholders, become wealth generators, so they can actually earn income from that. It's not just you can invest or have a job, you can become an income earner as part of that token. And it's the beauty of how blockchain wealth can spread. So it's a unique kind of wealth generator we've never had.
How much of that?
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it totally does, but I want to drill down. How much of that ability to become like an income earner off of a token, right? I'm seeing that. I'm talking to people here who are artists who are experiencing that.
Great. I want to talk about it with artists because it's a great example.
It's amazing. How much of that is there's a lot of opportunity right now because we're so early? And so if you get in early enough, there's more opportunity. And how much do you think that really will persist over the maturation of blockchain?
Listen, again, there are people who are far more expert at this than me, right? I get the gift of being able to interview a lot of really smart people and have really great conversations, bringing them together. It has the potential to be absolutely transformative. It is not a closed, I sometimes like say blockchain can redefine capitalism. It's not a closed end thing. It's not a limited pool. Oh, you got in early, too bad for everybody else. It's a continual wealth generator. As long as people keep seeing and adding the value to something, it keeps going. So you create more and more wealth in the process, right? An example like Packet, decentralizing broadband. Everyone's got their broadband, they're paying the provider. Remember, the internet was going to be free.
Yeah.
But now you have to pay because you got to pay someone to get on it. What about all that unused bandwidth space, all that space you have? Well, if you could mine that and share it and sell it, you'd make money and someone else would get the bandwidth, right? There's a ton, everybody needs bandwidth. The ability to build a community and spread that just keeps growing. It's not a Ponzi scheme where it runs out. It just keeps growing. It just keeps spreading. And in the process, you bring broadband to people who don't have it. You bring income to people who are sharing broadband in their community in a less developed country and creating that wealth. You're creating stakeholders of wealth, and it just keeps going. And there's endless possibilities. That's why I think people who are in the space in these communities see the power it can do, say, to a community or a culture, or even for artists to create, but for whole communities to value a culture and create wealth aggregation around. One of the things I love about some of the NFT conversations is the idea that you could have a token that could actually give back to the culture, the community of that original culture, to make revenue from it versus just someone selling t-shirts.
I mean, I love it. That's obviously the great white hope for any of us who are in this space is and why I'm here, because I want to talk about how that's happening. One thing that I thought was interesting.
Before you ask that, let me ask you something. As someone looking at the space, right? Did you come in, and you do a popular podcast on it. Do you see, do you feel like most people in the artistic space are starting to understand how you could, for lack of a better word, you can mint the art, mint the culture, you can create that value? Do they see that?
I think people are. I think the concern I have is that I see artists who don't know who don't know much about blockchain, right? They see the NFT space and they're like, cool, I can become a millionaire, right? They look at the headlines and they're and it's no, this is still an industry like any other. It requires a lot of work to build a name for yourself. There's still gatekeepers. And I think right now, it's easier than it's ever gonna be because it's only gonna get more saturated. So that's why I ask about that. that long tail of this, because I think it's like social media. Like in the early days of social media, people who were using it well could get traction really easily. Now there are so many people out on social media, so it's harder, right? It's still doable, but it just means you have to get more creative. It evolves in terms of how to make a name for yourself using the platform and using the technology. And I think that's what'll happen with NFTs, is like it'll get harder as it gets more saturated to differentiate yourself, and it's totally doable, and it's amazing technology that some people who couldn't monetize their work before will manage to leverage in a totally new way that they couldn't have done previously. So it's still a win, but it's not a silver bullet or a magic bullet that no matter what will make you money.
So I think that's a great way to sort of see it. In my head, the way I look at it is, you might have had this conversation in 1997 or 98 or 99 around what they called net commerce. You know, well, some people will be able to, and some people will never use it because, you know, mom and pop shops aren't going to go, because everyone had to be more coded and everything. You had to be more of a techie to do it, right? Cut to today, nobody goes, well, you know, there's a limit on how much people can make, you know, using online commerce. There's really no limit. You have to have a good idea, but everybody's got there is no such thing. The middle of the, you can be like in Antarctica and someone's probably got their like Airbnb online for the true adventurer, come here. You know, it's like, you don't go, oh, well, you know, that space is full. Yeah. And I think the problem is we're not quite there yet. Where the technology, it's still more early adopter. Yeah. It's still more a little tech heavy. But we're gonna see a point in the not too distant future where that technology has been more integrated and the apps and the on-ramps and the things are there that make it far easier access. Just like now on your phone, you don't think about it. You don't think about your web address. You don't think about your email address, but people did in the late 90s. And once that starts happening, and I think really smart people in the space have told me it is happening at twice the speed of what was happening in the 90s. We are moving fast. Once that happens, those technologies become more easily adoptable. It's built into your phone. All that stuff's there. And then you're right, you know, you still have not everybody can necessarily succeed, but it's not like it's a limited pool any more than the internet was.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, we're so early that you can't necessarily even see what's going to evolve from this. Like, you know, I've seen people give the examples of like when the car was invented, we didn't anticipate like rental car industries and insurance. Like we didn't anticipate all the ancillary industries that get built. And there's probably an even more technologically, you know, advanced, analogy to give there. And so I think it is absolutely like that. And I think what'll inevitably happen is the cynics will say, you know, like, well, look, it didn't, you know, suddenly make everyone rich, and it didn't pull every country that's in poverty out of poverty, and and somehow use that as a way to discount the fact that there are all these people who were in poverty who now aren't, only because of this. Or, you know, the fact that every artist isn't selling their work right now as an NFT somehow discounts the fact that you have artists, and I've spoken with them here, who are like, I couldn't make it in the gallery industry. I wasn't getting, I couldn't monetize my work as a digital only artist. And now I suddenly can. And like, instead of focusing on how incredible it is that anybody is able to now live their life more authentically, there's a focus on the fact that not everyone somehow is. Right. It's this very
so this is cool.
phenomenon.
This is cool because I want to address that for a second in the NFT space. Okay. But the piece into that for me, you mentioned, you know, now everybody's a content creator, you know, on social media, whatever. I worked and, you know, had my first big jobs when you had to go through gatekeepers. Yeah. And get on Fox by having a great idea that a lot of people were looking at. You got on because an executive who you convinced, and maybe you were super talented and smart, but you got lucky in that sense. You had to squeeze through the narrow gateway, and only this many get on. And by the way, we decide whether to pull you. Maybe how many great shows had critical reviews or audiences loved it and they cancel it, right? Nothing you can do. You can beg, please give me back. The difference that happened in the content creation space was, yes, everybody and their brother and sister and neighbor can make a show. And maybe you'll only have 100 followers. But by taking away the gatekeepers, you create an endless number of possibilities, as you said, for people to go, yeah, but wait, I have an interesting idea. And if that idea really is cool and interesting enough and it has value to people, it works and you don't need anyone's permission. I think in the NFT space, we're seeing that potential. And I love your point, like how many artists, and not just art, like publishing, writing, songs, how many people in the space have always struggled making very little, super talented. Some get lucky, some are, boom, and the rest don't, right?
Yeah.
This space creates a way to truly create a much broader monetization. Not everyone's going to be ultra rich, but to have your work valued and actually be able to live as an artist, that doesn't exist.
Yeah, and even to have the gratification, like, an artist I spoke with who was like, it's a shot to your self-esteem when a gallery won't take your work, or, you've got these gatekeepers who basically have determined that whatever, you're not up to their standards, this and that, and then you take it to the public and you go wide with it and you make it an NFT and you say, and suddenly you're getting that validation, like, no, there is an entire group of people that resonates with this for me, or, resonates with my art. And like, I think even from that standpoint, to your point, like, you may not become a millionaire, but like that in and of itself is like a beautiful thing. And social media did that in some ways, to your point, with shows or with people who had ideas and opinions that Fox didn't want to put on the air or CNN didn't want to, give a show to, and now they have a Think following, or they have an Instagram following.
Or look at, you have a podcast.
Well, this is what I tell people about this industry.
You did this, right?
Totally.
And you think you would have made it through the little narrow gatekeeper?
Yeah.
Maybe 1 in a million shot.
But it was more forget it also just being in this industry, and this is partly the early thing, right? Like the opportunity, I'm in Puerto Rico right now talking to you, talking to all these people because this industry partly is nascent, but also like has this awesome community that like the community has determined there's value in it, and CNN probably certainly doesn't think there's value in this right now.
I think that is the key. When you say the community is determined value, one thing that I think is so essential to understanding, the blockchain crypto space is the community side, One of the big OG going way back to the early days, the Bitcoin beginnings, right? Said to me, he said, you know what? He's like, and he says it publicly, if your goal is just to come to Puerto Rico, get into crypto and get rich, and you could apply this to anywhere, not just in Puerto Rico, you're missing the point.
Yeah.
Now, you may get lucky and make money, but the point of the crypto blockchain space has always been about creating community and creating change, wealth aggregation, more independence, more freedom, more autonomy, right? That's a part of it, and you shouldn't decouple them. And people who are super successful will say, don't you decouple those at your own long-term success risk, because without community, it doesn't work. With community, there's endless value.
Yeah.
There's endless value. So to the space of like, say publishing, that's a really good example. If you publish a book right now, you either used to get a big publisher. If you don't get the big publisher, you self-publish.
Yep.
Okay, and the whole joke with self-publishing is, it's self-published.
What's your distribution? How are you going to get anybody?
Anybody can self-publish a book now, so it means nothing. Look, I put my book on and it became a bestseller in 4 hours on Amazon, and everyone's like, whatever, right? And I've heard people say, right, you're publishing a book, self-publishing, so nobody cares, nobody notices. And I've heard people argue, well, because the NFT space is creating a way to create self-published books, not just music and artwork.
Yeah.
And people say, yeah, but no, you're not going to be able to get mass distribution that way. And you said something really important when you said community. It's like you don't need everyone in the world to know about your book or to buy your art. You need a community that values it. So if you have a community that cares about your art, cares about your book, cares about your topic, that's all you need.
Yeah.
You don't have to be the world's #1 bestseller. Maybe your ego wants that. You can make money and build and thrive in niche communities.
Yeah.
And blockchain crypto creates the ability for an endless number of niche communities. You've got a community that values it, you're in and good.
Totally, and this is why the gatekeeper concept is so absurd on the face of it, right? That you're going to have like a handful of people who are going to represent a very specific, like narrow set of their own interests, determining what everyone's interest should be. I mean, we saw that fracture with social media, and I think this is just, that fracturing on steroids in terms of a way to monetize it for individual creators and new avenues by which to build those communities.
How long have you had your podcast?
Since late October, early November.
Right, young, right?
New.
And would you say you're doing pretty well?
So much better than I could have ever imagined.
Right, now let's back it up 10 years. And you're gonna do a show. And you're gonna pitch who? You're gonna pitch some big podcast, some big platform.
Yeah.
And they say no. No one's gonna want that show. No one cares, right? Nothing you can do, right? You start, you create, you have a good idea, suddenly it's gaining traction, right? You are living proof of how that works. And you don't need the whole world to know. And then now people will sponsor you and support you and people want in. You're building it the same way, and that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
And like, she's gonna be able to do the same thing. But the difference with kids, I think, is they're gonna grow up little kids are going to grow up in a world where this technology is like a 15-year-old today with,
It's so omnipresent, it's going to seem completely normal.
It's going to be different. They're going to not think of this as a weird space that they don't understand. And what do you mean? And what's an NFT? And wait, what's a crypto? It's going to be, what do you mean? Get my phone out here. It's going to be so organic to them.
Okay, we have to wrap, so I'm going to ask one final question, which is, are you planning on staying in Puerto Rico? That's the pre-question. Okay, so in 5-10 years, like, what do you think this will be like as it pertains to Web3? What do you hope it looks like with Web3? Is it the Silicon Valley of Web3? Where does this end up?
Yes, so I think the answer to that is there may be a couple Silicon Valleys of Web3, and that is a little different. And again, as I was saying before, that partly has to do with the nature of how Silicon Valley required you to have people in a place, the developers, the potential to finance, to fund, the capital, all that. Blockchain allows a lot more of it to happen all over, decentralized, right? That doesn't mean you won't have concentrations though, because the concentrations still exist where like ideas, brain trusts, creativity it's just the nature. We're human beings. We engage by what's around us. Puerto Rico, I really believe Puerto Rico is perfectly poised to be one of those Silicon Valleys. Like I said, Miami's fighting for it too. Miami's doing it all right? New York's going, we want in. LA's like lost a little bit on that process, but who knows? So yes, I think you're going to see it blossom and emerge in Puerto Rico. Won't be the only one.
Yeah.
Like I said, Dubai, you're going to place this out. You're going to see this revolution of creativity and technological change and social, political, economic change happening everywhere. But I think Puerto Rico is going to be, it's already becoming a hub of it. There is a unique amount of energy and creativity and technology and capital flowing here. And it's going to keep percolating. And it's going to benefit the Puerto Rican community. And I just want to be clear, not just because they get a side benefit from, there's more jobs or tourism or hotels or whatever, because they become part. It is in a way a perfect place because there are economic development challenges here to create that. I had a great conversation with a member of the mayor's cabinet of San Juan and he came out of the hood and talking about wanting to see how we could bring these these things into schools that are more remote, and start giving these kids for financial literacy in the blockchain space. And that's going to happen. And as you start creating that and developing that and educating and training, last thought on this, the number of Uber drivers I talk to in San Juan who will ask me when the minute they know something about blockchain or crypto, like, I've gotten into crypto. And they're doing it, they see it as a way to start creating another income stream that they control and own. And it's not like once in a while. It happens all the time. Yeah. And that's the difference.
What excites me about that is it reminds me, I worked in politics, you and I both worked in politics, and I was in Iowa for the presidential campaign, and it was like the amount of like kind of political literacy and like election illiteracy in Iowa is so high because they're this early state, and so it's just imbued in the culture there. And I think you're starting to feel that here in Puerto Rico, which is that everybody is sort of aware of crypto in a way that you don't see everywhere else because it's becoming sort of a cultural industry and an industry that's important here on the island, which is exciting.
And that does mean everybody talking, working together, bringing it together, right? It is a process. Yeah. I truly believe there is a real commitment, certainly on the part of Roundtable, to be that bridge, to be part of building that bridge that really does involve and engage and create that value wealth for Puerto Ricans, and that becomes their wealth. And it's going to happen in all kinds of, especially like places where you have a lot of unbanked people, I'm saying here, around the world. It really will happen, and it will take everybody coming together and working. And that's why I think Roundtable is here and why it's so cool, because we are going to be part of that collective process of creating that. And I think it's going to end up being a pretty beautiful story.
Awesome. Well, we'll come back to track the aftermath of the story, call it, or as it further unfolds. Awesome. Well, thank you, Rob. I really appreciate it. Thanks. This is awesome.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Overpriced JPEGs. If you liked this conversation, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and hit subscribe. It helps me out, it helps the show out, and it means you will get alerts and updates when we post new content. Thanks again.